In the previous video, I shared how to turn an iPad into the only display for a Mac mini. After everything is set up, all you need is a single USB cable to connect the iPad and Mac mini. Power on the Mac mini, open Yam Display on the iPad, and the iPad will immediately show the full macOS desktop. You don't even need an internet connection. In terms of real-world usage, whether it's office work, video editing, or web browsing, you get a full desktop-level experience. The interaction logic is also very close to a native Mac. Instead of a compromised experience like remote desktops or cloud computers, to a certain extent, this setup can even replace a MacBook. If you already own an iPad, you can choose a cheaper but more powerful Mac mini instead of buying another MacBook. However, after using this setup for a longer period of time, I noticed a problem that seriously affects the overall experience. When you use the iPad's built-in trackpad to control macOS, some gestures are triggered by iPadOS first instead of macOS. For example, when you swipe up with 4 fingers, you don't get Mac's window management, but iPad's multitasking interface. And when you move the cursor to the bottom of the screen, instead of bringing up the Mac dock, you get the iPad dock. This constantly interrupts your workflow and completely messes up your muscle memory. So in the previous video, the solution I gave was simple. Use an external mouse connected directly to the Mac mini. This way, all input logic goes back to macOS and no longer conflicts with iPadOS. But that creates another problem. The original intention of this setup was portability, and carrying an extra mouse defeats that purpose. In this video, I found a better solution. I no longer use the iPad's trackpad, and I don't use an external mouse either. Instead, I use my iPhone as the trackpad for the Mac mini. The biggest advantage of this solution is that it adds almost no extra burden, because whether or not you use an iPad with a Mac mini, as long as you're an iPhone user, you already carry your iPhone with you every day. Download Tracepad from the App Store on your iPhone and install its Mac version on the Mac mini as well. The first time you open it, macOS may ask you to enable permissions. In system settings gives privacy and security, mainly accessibility-related permissions. Without them, the cursor simply won't move. I also recommend setting it to launch automatically at startup. So every time you power on your Mac mini while working outside, it connects immediately. Once connected, you'll find that the iPhone screen works just like a trackpad, allowing you to control the Mac's cursor with great precision. The experience is smooth, with no drifting and almost no noticeable latency. While it's not as good as Apple's Magic Trackpad, it's more than enough for everyday work. I've even used it to edit videos. One thing to note is that advanced gestures and landscape trackpad mode require a $2.99 subscription to unlock. I've placed a discount code in the description and pinned comment. Now let's take a look at what it can do. Single finger swipe moves the cursor. Single finger tap is left click. 2-finger tap is right click. 2-finger vertical swipe scrolls pages. 2-finger pinch zooms in and out. 3-finger swipe allows you to drag content. 4-finger swipe up opens mission control. 4-finger pinch opens Launchpad. The most important point is this. You can finally move the cursor to the bottom of the screen and smoothly bring up the Mac dock. The entire input logic fully returns to macOS, and you eliminate the need for a mouse. What surprised me the most is that it also supports haptic feedback. When you long press the screen, it uses vibration to simulate the pressure feedback of a trackpad, allowing single finger dragging. So in real use, the experience feels very similar to using a physical trackpad. At first, I noticed that the screen showed nothing but a Bluetooth icon with no other visible settings. I initially thought this was a UI bug, but later realized it's actually an advantage. It maximizes the usable trackpad area and prevents accidental touches. By tapping the Bluetooth icon, you can open settings or bring up the keyboard, which means your iPhone can also function as a keyboard for the Mac. Another very thoughtful feature is automatic Bluetooth connection. If you're using this iPad plus Mac mini setup while working outside, and you don't have a mouse and haven't connected to Wi-Fi yet, you can still use Tracepad to connect to the Mac and complete the most basic setup and operations. At this point, you now have a complete input and display setup. A Mac mini, an iPad, an iPhone, plus a Magic Keyboard or any Bluetooth keyboard. The Mac mini handles performance. The iPhone handles pointer input. The iPad handles display. If you want to learn how to use an iPad as the only display for a Mac mini, you can find the previous video on my channel homepage. Even if you don't use this full setup, using an iPhone as a control device for a Mac is still a very practical trick on its own. That's everything for today's video. I'll continue sharing more real-world experiences around iPad productivity, paperless workflows, and efficient work setups. If you find this content helpful, feel free to subscribe to the channel